Oh my goodness. You are such an inspiration. Wow, you really are. You're so strong. Can I pet your service dog? Ugh. 1, 2, 3, let's go! We are artists, parents, teachers, good guys, bad guys, students, leaders. I'm not your inspiration, yeah, I'm fully who I am. Got my own expectations that don't fit into your plans. I'm not your sad story, so I wrote it in this song. Everything you know about disability is wrong. Yeah, everything you know. Yeah, everything you know about disability is wrong.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong. Today we have comedian Tina Friml with us. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for being here. This is so nice, and indeed, I've said this before. I love just the title of this podcast.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much. I gotta give credit, Erin. Erin came up with that title, and it was like the second that you told me that that was going to be the title, it was like, well, I'm on board. We're doing this.
Yeah.
So, listeners, Tina is a New York-based comedian, originally from Burlington, Vermont. She exploded into the comedy scene, appearing on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon and Comedy Central in 2023. And she continues to perform at sold-out shows internationally. Having merged into stand-up comedy following an upbringing in local theater kids, yes, in a decade as a songwriter, she was named 2019's Just for Laughs New Face and has appeared on The Drew Barrymore Show, 2019's New York Comedy Festival, 2019's Limestone Comedy Festival, and the NBC Comedy Spotlight Series as a part of the 2018 Women in Comedy Festival. She's the 2018 winner of Vermont's Funniest Comedian at Vermont Comedy Club, and we are so excited to chat with her today. This is going to be great. Yeah.
I'm
So good. So good.
Yes. Before we get started, we like to do some audio descriptions, just so our blind or low vision listeners can know what we look like. So I'm Erin. I have red hair, even though you can't tell in this lighting. I have blue eyes, and I'm wearing a brown sweater, and I'm white presenting. I'll pass it to Lily.
Hey, listeners, this is Lily. I am a woman in my mid-20s. I am white passing. I have brown hair and green eyes, and I'm wearing a black button-up shirt and the necklace I always wear that I will fidget with throughout the episode. Tina, you want to go ahead and do your audio description?
Sure. Let's see. I'm Tina. I'm a 30-year-old lady with red hair and I know turquoise t-shirt, and I'm surrounded by clothing, which I like piles of laundry and linen, which I promise is clean.
That's what this closet door, I feel like it always looks kind of ominous behind me, but it's like all the clothes that would show just get shoved in there.
I love it.
Yeah. See, I'm like in the middle of Brooklyn, so I don't get the luxury of like closet doors.
Right.
I just get a room.
Yeah, the floor is your closet.
Yeah, exactly. As you can see, the other half of my queen test bed is great storage space.
Absolutely.
So this podcast is named what it is, and you want to know what should people get wrong about you and your disability.
I would say like the most thing that people get wrong and people kind of get caught up on is they think that I have cerebral palsy and I have a very mild condition, so it's kind of like I'm disabled. Well, like I said, I'm disabled, but I'm not totally committed to the lifestyle. It mainly just affects how I talk and my fine motor skills. And aside from that, it's, I don't really have any hindrances. I don't often need like accessibility stuff. Um, and well, it's hard because it's like, but when I'm not quite like I'm too I, sometimes I'm too able-bodied for a lot of accommodations that get offered to me. And but likewise, I do need certain accommodations, and I don't really fall into either box. So the thing that people most tend to get wrong is they think that the things that I am able or not able to do because of my disability are like, but that, I mean, like, it would make sense if at a certain point, like, a spectrum of all the things you could do in life on a day-to-day basis, um, at some point in that spectrum, these tasks get technical enough where I can no longer do anything past a certain thing. But that's not true. I don't know if I'm explaining this right.
I get it, yeah.
What, like, for example, like, people get really, um, surprised when I tell them that I rock climb. I'm a rock climber. Um, and yet like a minute later, we'll go get coffee and I cannot carry coffee. Like I need them to help carry my coffee if I'm waiting for like 5 feet from one service to the next. Um and I say that as an example because I didn't fully realize this until about a year ago. My boyfriend, when I first kind of got to know him, yeah, he got tripped up me. He said, "Yeah, what do you mean you rock climb? Like, because today was the coffee thing, and that was weird. Also, it's like I cannot put jewelry on. Like I can't really put a necklace on. I can do extremely good eyeliner, so it's like um yes. So the hill that I will die on today, this lovely morning, is that the thing about it is illogical, and it really like sometimes they don't always assume you can kind of get a grasp on what a person can or cannot do, because the reality is you don't know. You don't know, like, just because someone cannot do one task, it might totally be unrelated to another task that they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that speaks to, like, don't make assumptions. And every disabled person is different in what they can and can't do, even within the same disability. So I feel like that is a very good example of that. Because, like, people assume I can't do most things, and they're not wrong. But, like, I can do a lot, and you're surprised by, like, very basic things that I can do. Like, go to work, have a job. You know what I mean? So, that's really
Yeah, I
good.
think that's like, I think it has to do with the like people really wanting to be able to figure us out and like put us into a clean box. And
Mm-hmm.
like, because having a non apparent disability, like being autistic, I feel like I get the same kind of thing when it comes to like social stuff. Like my friends will be shocked that I'm really good at like a work conference. Like I love a work conference where I'm meeting strangers, but like a restaurant is really hard for me, like talking to my friends at a restaurant, and it doesn't necessarily make logical sense. So people will be like, well, how come you can like go talk to strangers in this setting but not this setting? And it's like, because I'm a human, like with complex, like I'm just like real. Like there's certain things that I can and can't do. And I think that it does make people like a little uncomfortable that they can't figure us out immediately. And I think that has to do with like even more than just disability. When you talk like sexuality or gender or anything like that, I think people really want people to fit into nice, clean boxes. And that's just like not how humans work.
And even, well, I think that's exactly it. Like, even if you do one thing outside of the thing that you should or should not do in the box that you're kind of in, it trips people up, I think. And I know that whenever I'm around someone and I am doing something that was say people might not think I could do something super simple like tying my shoes. And and I want to know if you guys get this too, but like after 30 years of being in a disabled body, I I got like a fine to I can pick up when people things or feeling things. I get a very so slight vibe. And I can kind of tell like that the people is uh, thinking to themselves like, do I help her? Do I do I ask that? Or like do I not? Is that it was, and again, like it was something my boyfriend actually opened my eyes to. He's so articulate when it comes to this stuff. So like I've learned so much about kind of the other point of view, and he does in fact talk about like he didn't know what whether to even ask. Is it empowering? Like I mean, is the big conundrum is like do not ask because it's empowering for them to do it themselves. Do you offer help because otherwise you're kind of a dickhead for just standing there and like watching our entire shoes even though it takes longer. And when he posed that question, like, which one should I do? Even I said, oh, I don't know. Because, I mean, that's the tricky thing. Disability is such a tricky topic, and I think people want to put in boxes. Want to say, this is the cool thing to do for everyone. But that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said, like, that you can get vibes from people. It's like the disability sixth sense. Like, you just can tell when somebody's, like, have the gears going in their head. Like, what do I do? What do I say? So it's kind of funny after a while, because you're so used to it, that it's like, alright, this can be comedic. Because sometimes you have to laugh. Otherwise, you would just crumble and not age it, you know?
It's like I see uncomfortable people.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
That is really that's a good bit. And that's really like, yeah, you just like see it's like someone's looking at you like a math problem to like solve. Like it's not, and it is like you do pick up on that, and
Mm-hmm.
I think you make a good point, Erin. you gotta laugh or else it can kind of get dark. Do you think for you, Tina, that like was that part of your story in finding comedy at all? Like, do you think there was, and I say this like projecting a little, because for me, I definitely used comedy to like get through finding out I had autism and things like that. So how does comedy tie into your like self-identity?
Oh, 100%. Like, black and white. It was actually, people get surprised when I tell them that, like, before comedy, I was actually quite in denial. I did not want to talk about being disabled. Um, if it did, it would send me into a spiral. I really, particularly as a kid and like a teenager, I kind of, well, being different is the worst thing you could do. Um, uh, so I thought, well, at the very least, I can, pretend it's not there, and surely it's not that bad. Um, and comedy was really the way it completely turned my life around in terms of not only radical self acceptance and even going a step further and saying here I am putting myself out there to the masses. But I think also it just like it really comedy, I always call it the spoonful of sugar that people need to be able to hear about the disabled experience without getting so bummed out. So you need the humor. Um, whenever these days something says out and about and I get some interaction that's just questionable and someone says something a little bit sideways to me thinking they're being helpful but they're not. Before it would have ruined my day. These days I'm just more kind of like, oh my god, write that down. Like, get a pen, where's the pen? That's now paying my bills.
That's the best thing you can do with some casual ableism. It just turned it into a bag to secure. It doesn't have any other better purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like exploiting ableist people, just turning it around. Instead of them exploiting us, we'll exploit them.
I think, yeah, I actually think that it's a perfect way to put it. Is like, well, because every now and then I do actually get comments on the internet of people being like, I want to laugh at this. Also, kind of like, is she exploiting herself? Which, like, it's, I'll give this, it's a very interesting thought because, like, it's like, well, can you exploit yourself? Is or is completely an oxymoron if it's yourself and something about you. And yeah, but I mean that in itself was an interesting thought. But I think also it's like, well, I don't feel like I'm exploiting myself. I'm quite literally exploiting the able. I'm exploiting you to yourself.
Yeah, that is a really good way to put it. And yeah, it's such I as a thought experiment, it's like an interesting question, I suppose. But isn't that like comedy in general, like exploiting what you've been like exploiting? Like what I say that with finger quotes because like, you know, how many people's jokes come from like working through childhood trauma. Like that's like such a big part of comedy. I think that's, and you know, I think about like early women comedians who had to use the fact that like they were subjected to extreme misogyny and sexism, and like that is, you know, like Carol Burnett's got so many early things about like I'm just a sexy face, like doing that, like kind of that's yeah, it's not exploiting yourself, it's exploiting the like societal expectations, and you know that is a joke to subvert expectation. And I think that like it's not our fault that people have such weird expectations for us as disabled people, like so we might as well make jokes out of it.
Right? Well, exactly. It's just kind of like that's the thing that I think bothered me about it was that what that commenter was really saying was just that well, I mean, here we are trying to get, above our situation, and actually what we're just doing is anything we're writing about, we're talking about, we just happen to be doing it in the form of comedy. And it's almost that like when you're saying like, oh, but that's almost like self-exploitation, it almost is, that operating off of that mentality that this is the thing, this is a negative thing about us. This is a real othering that we're now trying to capitalize on a very bad situation.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, that's my definition of exploitation, is capitalizing on, I guess, a very bad situation, or a very vulnerable, weak situation. And so it's kind of like self-exploitation is saying that no matter what, no matter how good your jokes are, it will be vulnerable and weak, and you are capitalizing on a tragedy that is you.
Yeah, it's just, like, it's like what you said. People put disability into a box, and they don't want to see it, and they don't want to learn about it. So when you're confronted with disability, a lot of people think of it as, like you said, it's exploitation. But it isn't. This is just us.
Yeah, in an episode we recorded for this season, we're talking to Galen Lee, and we were talking about how you can see that people are like still scared at, like, or still assuming disability is such a negative thing when you have the like internet people who are like, don't say disability, say like different ability, or like the the ways to not say disability. And in that episode we brought up that like disability is a net neutral term, like it's just a state of being, like it's just it's the experience of our life. Like, so if you're saying we're like exploiting that, it doesn't really make like it's just your story, there's nothing being exploited there. And I think that that's a really poignant thing what you said, Tina, of like that, how good do your jokes have to be to not be seen as like this weak, like that you're exploiting your weaknesses rather than just talking about your life. Yeah, it's an interesting comment. I get like where they were coming from, I suppose, but I don't think it actually comes from a place of like curiosity. I think it comes from a place of like wanting to shut something down, like wanting to be like, I caught you, disabled person, enjoying yourself. Like, how dare you?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that was the thing, when I read that comment, and I got really philosophical about it to my friends. And one of my friends just I love this. I love this conversation. I don't think the commenter meant any of this. I think the commenter was just being a dick. Like, wanting to, um, I mean, and I actually do talk about this on statement. There are people, out in the world that, I mean, they're actually very good people, but they, um, for whatever reason, they can't quite wrap their head around disability. Um, they can't wrap their head around the nuances of it. And they can't 100% see with a person first. They I know it shows up in my experience as there are people who I've tried to have many conversations with every time I ran into them. Um, and they never quite talk to me, say, in a normal tone of voice. Or they never quite engage um in the same level of communication that they engage otherwise, or they're just super constantly like trying to accommodate every single thing that I do near them, and it's uh and like I say, it's not at all them being ableist in any kind of way, but some people are just um um have a harder time than others really seeing the person before the disability, no matter what.
Yeah, definitely. I've talked about this in making content for Easterseals in general, of that, like, there are people who have this, like, yeah, just like aversion to being able to accept it. And I think that there is a level of, because disability is like one of the only identity statuses that you can enter at any point in your life. I think that there are people who are non-disabled that are like so in denial of the fact that they could ever go through anything that would result in a disability, be it just aging. Like, there's that kind of fear, I think. So people just don't want to, or aren't able to grasp it, which is like sad. I wish people would realize, like, they're making the big deal. Like, they're like making it awkward. But I definitely, oh my gosh, what you said about the changing tone of voice, that's like a big one where, as soon as someone's voice goes from like talking normal to like, hi Lily, like, I'm so happy you're here, I'm like, all right, who told this bitch I'm autistic? Like, who said it? Like, I know someone did, because their voice is an octave higher and it wasn't like that. Like, it's just an odd thing. And I get it, it comes from a place of like maybe trying to be extra accommodating, but that is quite frustrating. So I think it's a thing we all deal with.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Not kind of shifting gears a little bit, I have a question. I saw that you recently decided that you were going to only book shows in accessible venues.
Yes.
What brought you to that decision, and how has tour planning been since making that decision?
So yeah, my team and I kind of got into. We'd already been kind of on the status quo that when we go to a new city, um, we want to opt more for like ADA compliant, accessible venue first. If not, no big deal. But we always ask. Like, I from my end of things, like I always ask so that I can, promote that on my posters and stuff like that, like, oh, ADA compliant. Um, and then one fine day, I went on tour and I went to Denver and I went to this great room called Denver Comedy Underground. Uh, it was in fact underground. It was not EDA compliant. We knew that going in. Um, and all my shows, I love to talk to people. I love to do, I guess, what like a meet and greet. Take pictures and talk to folks and sign things and stuff like that. Um, we had a great session of that, and towards the end, a lovely person came up and just said that was great. My partner is actually a big fan of yours, um, and they're hoping you can come say hi. And I'm like, oh, of course. Like, what? And where are they? And this person said, oh, they're actually, so they are still in their seat, because they're actually a wheelchair user, um, and the wheelchair is left up at the top of the stairs, in the entrance. And what happened was recruited incredible people from the audience to be lifted down the stairs by sheer, manpower, and so they could sit in the audience and enjoy it. And I was mortified. I was mortified. Like, I spoke to them and they were so happy. They were, resilient, because that's the thing when you have a disability, you are resilient. And they were just so happy it worked out. And they were not the only ones at that show. It was they were they were down the stairs by another person who was a parent of a young person who also had a disability, also wanted to see my show, and was also being lifted down there. So it was kind of like, oh, well, we're already doing this. Let's get you down here too. And I they were so happy to be there, and I talked to them, and yet I was just mortified. My heart was so broken because no one should ever need to do that. Um, and on top of that, I had told my manager that, and she equally was just so bothered by this. So from that point forward, we said, we're only going to schedule my headlining show in ADA compliant venues, and fully ADA compliant. So that means, if a venue is technically accessible, but the bathrooms are not, problem. It's, we cannot be there. And so far we well, I guess I can't talk because I'm not the one who books the shows. My team is, but um, we haven't really been having a hard time finding great venues. Um, it really depends on the city. Like, really, like, um, there are some cities that unfortunately just are very cities dated, and they just I'll talk to locals, and they're not surprised at all that we had a hard time finding accessible venues. Montreal being one of them, um, and um, you know, just well, I was in New Orleans, and we did find a very cool, funky, um, uh, compliant venue, but yeah, no, some cities are better than others. Um, and there has been so far one or two venues where we booked it, and then we had to work with the booker and promoter to change the venue, keep the same people that keep the same offer, keep the same date, but change the venue to actually be a more compliant area. And on top of that is also um, some of these clubs are accessible, but we found out that people had to call ahead so that they had the elevator turned on. And that's
I hate that.
no.
Why did you turn your
No,
elevator off?
turn your elevator on. It's kind of like, I know it's not my responsibility, but yes, it is. Like, it is more my responsibility than the person um trying to buy a ticket and support my new comedy career. Like, they're like, they should not need to call the venue to make sure that they can get in. That's on us. So, um, it's still like a growing kind of process, but like, we never looked back. We never will look back for all the little minor snafus, or extra steps that it takes. It's well beyond worth it just to kind of get everyone in there that wants to be in there, because a lot of folks that do like my comedy, they like it because they can relate, because they have disabilities. So it's just naturally like, why wouldn't I want to have a party that everyone can actually get to?
Yeah, I think that's just like incredible that you and your team made that choice and you're not looking back. I have to say, how wild is it that places will be like, we're accessible except for the
Mhm.
bathroom. And it's like, what, have you ever met a human who doesn't use the bathroom?
Yeah.
Or like they'll say, yeah, it's accessible. You can carry your
Hmm.
chair upstairs. My chair weighs 400 pounds. You're not gonna carry it. Like,
Yeah, and it's thousands of dollars. I'm not gonna let
yeah,
some people I don't know carry it. Like that would be wild for you to let people.
Well,
Yeah.
that was the thing that I thought of. Like, in Denver, they kept their chair at the top of the stairs, like right near the door, and I was kind of like, who's watching that? Because that's a multi-dollar chair. Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors just made it
Yeah. I
not
think
okay.
yeah, I think it's really awesome that you're doing that and like, it's a fine line as you're like starting a comedy career. You want to be in like whatever venues you can be in, but I think it's really incredible that you are at a place where like you're selling out venues, so there is a little bit of like power in there to be like, no, I'm going to reward the accessible venues, and the venues that have prioritized accessibility are going to get a headliner who can sell it out. Like I think that's really important. And I think that like Galen Lee, the musician we had on recently, talked. It's very similar. It's just like how we owe that to each other as disabled people. That kind of like once we've got any leverage to make sure that the places we're in are prioritizing accessibility. Even and like listeners, I think that exactly what Tina said, that even goes for like a party. Like if you're throwing a party, consider some accessibility measures, like figure that out and make sure your building's elevator is on. Like things like that. Yeah. That's so wild. I wouldn't even think elevators could be turned off. Just seems like a bad idea.
It was something like that. Yeah. We had to look into it. I don't know if it was a full elevator or like a stair elevator, like a platform. But
wild.
Yeah.
Well, before we go into our third section where we'll discuss Easterseals pillars, I do want to ask, you were recently on Jimmy Fallon. What was that like?
Whoa. That was incredible. So I actually got into um so I got on the Tonight Show because I happen to I work at the Comedy Cellar, which is a very prominent comedy club in the heart of Manhattan in New York City. And one night I happened to be going up on stage. I looked to my left and Jimmy Fallon was there. He and his buddy, another fabulous comic, Mike Birbiglia, were out at dinner down the street about comedy. And I guess somehow they agreed, let's stop by the cellar just to watch, just to kind of dip our toes in. And I happened to be the one about to go on stage, and Jimmy and I, we hit it off going up there because I'm from Vermont. I began comedy in Vermont, and he began comedy in upstate New York. And basically, like, we were just bonding a little bit about that. He's such a sweet guy, so many stories. But I then had to, say a phrase I never thought I would say. I had to say, I'm so sorry, Jimmy. I have to go on stage now. He said, yeah, go kill it. He noticed that my mom and dad happened to be in the room when that happened. So this was all, yeah, like extreme serendipity.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I get up there, and so I'm trying to give the best comedy I can give for my mom and my dad and Jimmy Fallon. and and it went great, and I actually in the middle of it saw Jimmy sitting in the middle of the show. He'd actually snuck in and enjoyed my set. So thanks to my team and his team kind of jumping on it the next day, collaborating, I was able to go onto the Tonight Show, but 2.5 weeks after that. And it was just spectacular. Like, it was really just such a great experience. The staff there was so accommodating. I was kind of expecting, because I'm not a famous person in the way that the other guests like Scarlett Johansson and Hunter Schafer were. Totally understandably expecting I'm probably gonna be shuffled in and shuffled out, and it will be great. But no, I could hang out. I got my own dressing room. My mom and dad and my friend Maddie were there. Jimmy came around and hung out with us. It was really, really great. And like the one thing I will say is like the one note they didn't tell me until afterwards that the studio audience of the Jimmy Fallon Tonight Show is not really a stand-up comedy audience. It's just a group of people Midwest, no offense. They just like they're right, but the demographic is none. There is no demographic. Really, I think that the only thing that tied together the people that make up the Jimmy Fallon Tonight Show is that if you one by one went and asked if they wanted to go to a stand-up comedy show, they would say no. Like, so,
Oh man.
so here I am, my television debut. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. They loved it, but there would there were some jokes that like normally hit that like like they ain't clicking but and so like I heard nothing. The only thing that I heard was like Jimmy behind me at his desk dying laughing. Like okay, I'm doing it for him. It was great.
Yeah, if
Oh
you're
my
gonna
gosh.
make one person in the room laugh, might as well be Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon. The cameras cut to him twice within 5 minutes. Just like it's almost like Jimmy inviting that one friend over to his house party because he just loves them. But yeah, yeah, it was great. It was really, really it, I mean, cliche, but it really was a dream come true. Like, to this day, I can't believe that really happened.
Yeah, I mean, congrats. It was, I've watched that even before we knew you were coming on the podcast. I've watched that clip like 40 times. And I love when late night people have comedians on. It's like one of my favorites. And you certainly could not tell that you did not have a very receptive audience because it's a really good set. It's a really good set. And
I think you played it off pretty well. Yeah.
very, very well.
Yeah.
Well,
thing,
go ahead.
One thing that was at one point I didn't plan on doing this, but like when a joke didn't quite hit like a reference, and I said, well, here I'll explain the joke, and kind of on a whim, I said I'll explain the joke because it's a good joke. I'm on here for a reason. Like, and that was.
You didn't plan that?
No.
Oh my gosh, I've seen this so many times. I absolutely thought you wrote that in on purpose.
That was like I watched it back. It was obviously all a blur. I watched it back and like I've never felt more like iconic in my. I was like, I said that. I said that. Like that was the perfect thing to say, and I said that.
Yeah, it was a perfect. I know exactly what moment you're talking about, and it is a really funny joke. But that I absolutely would have thought that if I saw you in a different set, you would say that every single time because it worked so well. And like, I'm here for a reason. Like, so badass. And I think that more disabled people that get to be in places where we should get to be need to have that in their vocabulary. Like, I'm here for a reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Whenever I have imposter syndrome, which can tend to happen a lot in what I do, really is, I always think back to, like, don't ask yourself why you're here. Show them why you're here. Like, you're here for a reason. So show them why.
I love that.
Yeah, that's
It's like the perfect saying.
a really good mindset thing. And I think imposter syndrome, like, it's such a human thing. And Erin, I know you and I now are gonna say that to each other when we're like working on a writing thing and like second guessing ourselves. We'll be like, show them why we were asked to do this. That's really good. I love that. Well, we have a little bit of time left, and we like to end the interview with our third section, which is, this is an Easterseals podcast. Thank you to Easterseals for obviously allowing us to make this podcast and have amazing experiences like this. It's very cool that Erin and I get to do this as our job. And Easterseals is working towards equity and access when it comes to community, health, education, employment. What am I missing, Erin? Transportation. And education. And it's a lot of things because Easterseals is doing a lot. And so we just kind of like to talk to our guests about those pillars. And one thing I wanted to especially talk about when we talk about transportation, travel is something that, like, I don't think non-disabled people necessarily have a grasp on how difficult it can be to meet your own needs while traveling. So a huge part of being a comedian and growing your career is touring and traveling to new cities. How have you been able to accommodate your needs while also touring and doing that part of being a comedian?
Well, it's it's definitely been a process. I like I say, I never expected to be in a position where I travel a lot. And on top of that, I often I travel alone, so I am the one carrying my big suitcases. Um, I am the one navigating everything, which while I can do it's harder than I think it would normally be. Um, I know, I know that you know. Began to see, funny enough, even in the last year, I began to see like just ever so slightly more accommodations at the airport, which is nice. Um, uh, I often the airport is one of the only places where I actually opt for uh accommodations, even though I don't black and white need to have them, but they are extremely helpful to have. The pre-boarding, um, you know, having help with my suitcase, that kind of thing. Um, and whereas even in the past year, and maybe it just had to do with what airport I was at, but I found that it was to find those accommodations, you would really have to go further out of your way, um, and there weren't any accommodations, say, when it came to like TSA and stuff like that. Again, it might totally have to do with what airport it was, but recently I have been seeing not only more openly available accommodations, but I've been finding people at airports are actually trained pretty well um on how to accommodate, how to ask what they need. I have heard horror stories about people who are wheelchair users having their chair be pretty battered. Um so that's not an experience that I can really talk about. Um but in my own experience I've at least found um you know, airports are slowly, I think, the few that are actually starting to level up in their accommodations.
Yeah, I think that's a good and necessary thing. That's something that Easterseals is. We have a big campaign on trying to make air travel more accessible, because exactly what you said, the like 31 wheelchairs a day get broken, or some just outrageous statistic that, but it does take small steps, and we are seeing like certain airlines that have done things like trainings and trying to have just more accommodations available in the airport. I know that there are certain airports, like internationally, that have like sensory rooms for people to go into, or like there's like the sunflower badge things that people can wear that show that they have like a non-apparent disability and things like that. So like we're getting there, which is good, but I think that we've got a long way to go. So it's good that you're able to use what accommodations are available, because airports are confusing and like very stressful.
They are very confusing and stressful. Yeah. And that's the funny thing. Like, once I say this, you might never not see, so I'm sorry, but like, a lot of comedians have material to do with airports, airplanes, and hotel rooms, and that's because that's our life. Like,
Yeah.
like, it's what we do. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's like one of the things when we talk about air travel, like whenever we bring up that that's a thing that Easterseals is working for, like it people think air travel and they think like luxury or just like vacation, frivolous kind of travel, but like there are so many jobs that like
mhm.
in this world take a ton of travel. And I think about like how many opportunities people can't partake in if travel is not accessible. So I think that it's a really important thing like to have accessible travel, and we'll have
Yeah,
more. I'm sure there's lots of cool comedians out there who like maybe haven't been able to picture themselves being a comedian because it's of inaccessibility of things like travel. So
right.
yeah, I think that that's just a necessary thing.
I always say that, like, being as a comedian, like writing jokes and performing is like 5% of what you do. In the real, it really is. It's like, um, it's everything. It's you gotta get yourself from place to place to place to place. All looking at your email. Oh well, like making sure you brought your hair dryer, and like just it really like a one man show, and it's hard for anyone, but um the yeah the somewhat ironic element that like here I am going around um performing and talking a lot about kind of like my disability and stuff, and it's like it's like a triathlon for me to just manage to get there. It is like my exercise.
Yeah, it's a people don't realize being in comedy it's like a logistics game. Like there's so much
Yeah,
planning and preparation, and even before we
yeah.
started recording this call, you were telling us that you're packing for a 3-day trip here, but also packing for summer tour. Like there's just so much planning and involvement
Oh
that goes
my
into
god.
it. That's wild. Well,
Yeah.
we're pretty much out of time, but before we
Yeah.
say goodbye, I'd like to ask one last question, which comes from the fact that, comedy for a long time has been a world of non disabled, straight, white men. And
Mhm.
in terms of seeing the comedy industry become more inclusive, what would you say to someone out there who wants to pursue comedy but doesn't see a place for them in the comedy world yet? What would you say to them?
Mm. You know, And all into this pretty honestly, I think like these days there are actually some real great comedians out there. I'm just one. Um, and they're different. You know, there are a handful that have cerebral palsy. Um, there are some great comedians who have Tourette syndrome. Benny Feldman and Pam Schuler. There are some great comics in wheelchairs. Um, we are actually covering a footprint. Um, and really, I mean, thanks to the power of the internet and the power of the boom in reels and TikTok and social media, that kind of comedy is now accessible. Um, I always attribute I got into comedy in a very safe environment in the comedy scene in Burlington, Vermont, which was really great comedy coming out of there, but also it really was more of a friend community who just constantly lifted each other up doing comedy. And that was where I was able to develop myself rather than in like New York City where people are trying to make it into a career and there is a level of competitiveness and higher stakes and um uh I always say that being a disabled comedian, it in a very similar way to being a female comedian, is like there certainly are like drawbacks. You are going to get underestimated when you walk in the room until you hit you have to need to prove yourself on that stage. You're not going to be able you're going to feel like you're underestimated until you show off, until you prove yourself, basically. And that's just the way it is. So there are drawbacks. However, there are ways that me being a comedian with a disability um, benefit me. They get me into rooms which otherwise I might not be able to get into as a straight cis white man. You rise just based on the differences that you have. You gain more attention, and the way that I put it is it gets you in the room, but then you would need to prove yourself once you're in that room. Um, so I have always viewed disability in comedy as in this day and age as a double-edged sword for me. Um, and that it does, I do feel like I have to really be really excel. I have to write the best jokes. Just to keep up with the other element that I'm kind of facing head on, which is my disability. I always say I strive to not be a disabled comic. I strive to be a comic who have a disability. Um, and so all that said, all that wrapped up in the framework of advice is to really find a great community to start comedy in. Uh, I actually also started because I took a stand-up comedy class, and that's how I got the confidence to even begin the first month of comedy. On top of that, sort of accept the challenge, accept the challenge of rising to the occasion, embracing the fact you're going to be underestimated, um, and revel in the ability, the confidence that you have that you can get on that stage and prove them wrong. So
Yeah, nothing will fuel you quite like spite and like proving someone
spite,
wrong. Like,
pure
it's really
spite, pure
great.
made of spite.
Great. Yeah, like feel free to underestimate me. It'll just give me more to go on.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well,
yeah, shovel the coals into that fire.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tina. This has been a phenomenal interview, and I'm just so excited that we got to talk to you. And if before you go, if you want to tell our listeners upcoming tour dates or how they can follow you and get into your comedy.
Yeah, 100%. I am going on the road. I will, well, next month, in May, I'm going to be going into Kansas City, St. Louis on May 1st and 2nd. I'm also going to Las Vegas on May 15th, Salt Lake City on May 16th, and I'm also coming out to LA on May 9th. I'll be in New York City June 12th. Where else? So I'm going all over the place. Next fall, I'm doing everywhere. I'll be in Portland, Seattle. I'm going back to Phoenix. I'm doing a whole tour all around Florida. So I'm everywhere. And you can look at all my dates. All the tickets are on sale right now. If you find me on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, all the tickets are right on my bio.
And listeners, we'll have that linked in the episode description, so you can just check out right under this video and get yourself some tickets and enjoy a show in an accessible venue. Well, thank you so much, Tina. Erin, always a pleasure to host with my buddy. And listeners, we'll see you next time on another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong.
If you liked what you heard, go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you to our listeners, and as always, thank you to Easterseals for giving us the space and resources to share such authentic conversations from within the disability community to our listeners.
And we'll see you next time for another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong.
Everything you know about disability is wrong.
This is a podcast brought to you by Easterseals.
You know, we actually work for Easterseals, but maybe our listeners don't know what we do.
That's true. Easterseals is leading the way to full access, equity, and inclusion for disabled people and their families.
And did you know we've been doing this for more than a century?
This includes helping disabled people find meaningful employment and addressing healthcare needs for all ages.
We're proud to serve communities across the country and ready for the next 100 years. For more, check out Easterseals.com.